Hey everyone, Nubkeks here, and in today's video, I want to discuss the Shadow Priest on the World of Warcraft Shadowlands beta. What's changed? What's good about it? What's bad about it? As you guys probably know, I did main Shadow Priest for two of the tiers, Desara Lore and Eternal Palace, in BFA, so yeah, we'll dive into the spec and I'll let you know what I think. Let's do it. Okay, so before we talk about the good news and some of the cool new stuff that we're going to be getting in Shadowlands, you can see some of it here in the background. Let's just very quickly talk about the bad stuff, the things that we're going to be losing out on from BFA moving into Shadowlands. Of course, we're going to be losing out on Azurite traits, which are a pretty big deal for Shadow Priest. Chorus of Insanity was a very big part of what made Void Form powerful. Losing Whispers of the Damned actually feels pretty rough. You're going to have a lot less Insanity generation without Whispers of the Damned, and this does kind of push you a little bit towards picking up some Insanity generating talents in the talent tree to kind of make up for it. Losing Spiteful Apparition isn't too bad. That was just a numbers thing. We're also going to lose out on Essences, which was a lot of passive stats as well. The one thing I will miss out on from Essences was Memory of Lucid Dreams Major. That was super fun for like a very intense end of Void Form playstyle. Every 2 minutes, getting 15 seconds of double Insanity generation. So you'd have this really long Void Form. We'd be draining Sanity like crazy, but then also generating it like crazy as well with that Major Essence. So it's a bit of a pity that that isn't going to be a gameplay thing anymore. And then, of course, we're going to be losing all of the end of expansion stats, which feels very bad for Shadow Priest as a very haste-reliant spec. We're obviously losing all the gear that we had at the end of the expansion, and we're going to be in like questing gear, early dungeon gear, and the first raid tier gear, which is a lot worse. And then losing the corruptions from 8.3, severe and expedient. So, unfortunately, all of that stuff is gone. So that's the bad news. Luckily, we have a lot of good things coming, though, as well. I want to start with some baseline priest abilities first, then we'll look at Legendaries, Conduits, and, of course, the Covenant abilities. First up, we have Desperate Prayer. This is, or it was, the main defensive for Discipline and Holy Priests in BFA. We're now getting this as well, baseline, so that's really nice. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown, instant cast ability, which increases your maximum health by 25% for 10 seconds, and instantly heals you for that amount. So you can see, for example, pop it here. That's what it looks like. Very straightforward and quite nice. An extra defensive is always, always good. Next up, we have Mind Soothe. This is a 40-yard range, instant cast ability, which will soothe the target, reducing the range at which it will attack you by 10 yards. It will only affect humanoid and dragonkin targets. Actually, it's probably not gonna work on this guy. No, it's not. But yeah, it lasts for 20 seconds, doesn't cause threat. So, you know, you can cast this on something you're not in combat with. Like imagine I cast it on this guy. Okay, great. With the reduced threat range, I can sneak past him and up here. Kind of cool. Unfortunately, this doesn't affect your other party members yet. So that definitely sucks. It would be nice to either see that functionality baseline or to see some way to get that functionality with a talent or something. That would be fantastic, because that would make it a very useful tool for some skips in Mythic Plus. You know, it would be quite situational still. Only some skips it would enable, but it would still be pretty cool and be a nice little bit of extra utility, which would be quite unique for a priest to bring. So, yeah, hopefully we see something with that. Right now, though, with it only affecting you, I mean, maybe it will enable some skips. For the most part, it's not going to do much. Next up, we have a very significant one, and this is Power Infusion. 40-yard range, 2-minute cooldown, instant cast, which will infuse the target with power for 20 seconds, increasing haste by 25%. This is pretty big. If I just get into some casts here, and you can sort of see the rough flow. I'm not going to go Void Form or anything, because that obviously generates haste for us. See, this is sort of speed in my rotation. Here's a full Mind Flay. Full Mind Flay. Okay, let's go Power Infusion here. This is what it looks like, visual. And it's definitely going to noticeably speed up your casts here. I think it is roughly, in fact, Bloodlust has been nerfed to 25% haste as well, so it's equal to the power of a Bloodlust for 20 seconds. So this is very powerful. It's a very big deal. One thing, of course, with this, which is very significant for affecting Shadow Priest, is that this can be cast on anybody, any ally. It doesn't have to be cast just on you. So this could be a good thing or a very bad thing, depending on your preferences, I suppose. On the positive side, well, it could be pretty cool. Let's say, you know, I could cast it on, let's say we've got ads spawning in a particular fight. We want to AoE down those ads as quickly as possible. I've got a Ret Paladin in my group. He's going to pop wings. I know he's going to go blow him up. I can power infuse my Ret Paladin. He's going to just start blasting crazy AoE damage, and he's going to do way more thanks to me and my power infusion. That's pretty awesome. Or we're in a tough Mythic Plus fight, or we're in a tough arena match. Our party's kind of getting overwhelmed by damage. I can power infuse my healer and help the healer stabilize the group. I think that's quite cool, and that's quite exciting. That those are interesting uses of it. The downside, of course, is, well, it's essentially a damage cooldown. And as a damage dealer, let's be real, you kind of want to cast it on yourself. But that may not be the right decision. Or in fact, it could easily often be the wrong decision. Because again, Shadow Priest is not a bursty class. Like something like a Destrolock, a Fire Mage, a Ret Paladin, what have you. There's a lot of other classes that will probably benefit more from this than us. So you might not be able to cast this on yourself. It might be the wrong thing to do most of the time. And that's going to feel pretty bad, you know? You're going to look at the DPS meter and you're going to know that some of that DPS meter is going to other people thanks to your power infusion and not to you. So that's definitely a downside. For me, I haven't really decided if I like or dislike this yet. So, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. But for me, the jury's kind of out. Next up, we have... Where is it? I've lost it. Oh, yeah, that's right. It's in the generic priest spellbook, of course. But Shadow Word Death. These tigers are having a bad time. Let's move over here. Shadow Word Death. It's by default a 20-second cooldown. Reduced by haste, as you can see. 40-yard range, instant cast. Word of Dark Binding that inflicts 1,500 shadow damage to the target. If the target's not killed by Shadow Word Death, the caster takes damage equal to the damage inflicted upon the target, and damage is increased by 100% to targets below 20% haste. One thing that this does that doesn't say in the tooltip, if I come into here and you can see with my insanity, this does generate 15 insanity, regardless of anything. So it is actually worth casting. So long as that aspect remains, it is still going to be worth casting on CD just because of the insanity generation right now. I'm not sure if that's intended or not because it's not in the tooltip, but that's how it's working. Okay. So this is obviously great to have back. It's super fun. And it does have that execute component baked into it. It's just another ability that you're going to be pressing, you know, semi-often as part of your core rotation. And it's going to feel powerful to press. It gives you some mobility with the instant cast. And if you can use it to execute, it's going to feel great. One downside with this ability, which is quite substantial, is the damage reflection. You can see right there, I hit myself for 1,570. If that ability crits, that's going to do double damage. That's going to take a big chunk out of you. And if it's an execute as well, this is when things start to get a little bit scary. So it's going to be hitting for 3,000. And then if it crits, it could hit for 6,000. I can't remember if a crit spell is double damage or not. Let's say, though, it hits for 6,000. That's quite a significant chunk of my health just gone. Now, if I have any procs going off, like if I have an int trinket, like an on-use int trinket, or something uncontrollable, like a random proc int trinket that goes off and really ups my spell power before I cast this, or if the mob I'm fighting, like we break a shield on the mob and the mob takes double damage or what have you, anything like that comes together and starts to stack up, and you're going to absolutely shred off massive chunks of your own health bar with this if you're not careful. And in fact, there could be some encounters where you will literally one-shot yourself for maximum health if several different factors align in an unfortunate way. So that's definitely kind of scary, and that's something of a concern, that perhaps the damage aspect of it might be a bit too harsh. And of course, as we know, over the course of an expansion, spell power and primary stat, etc., secondary stats are going to typically scale much harder than our stamina scales. So it could be more scary later in the expansion. We'll have to see. But yeah, there's some downsides to it. But on the whole, I'm really happy to have this one back. It feels great. And yeah, it's cool. Then the final one, and this is a very big one for Shadow Priest, is Devouring Plague is coming back for us. This is a totally new concept from what we've had before, in the sense that this is an insanity spender. Prior to this, the only way we lost insanity was from draining it in void form, but now we have an additional way to spend insanity with Devouring Plague. Instant cast afflicts the target with a disease that instantly causes 890 shadow damage, plus an additional 3,500 shadow damage over 12 seconds, and it will heal you for half of the damage dealt. This does a lot of damage. Let me show it to you here when we cast it out. So we'll just like put some dots on and stuff like that. Okay, here we go. So Devouring Plague. Bam. That's what it looks like. The visuals aren't anything too special, but here it is ticking down. This is obviously very new, and we might see some more iterations on it as we go. Honestly, I thought that I would really dislike this one. I thought I really wouldn't like it, but I have to say that I actually kind of do like it now, having played around with it a little bit. It's actually growing on me. It's actually starting to grow on me. Let's throw it out here. Bam. You can see it's sort of ticking away for damage. It's a little bit clunky in terms of how it's going to fit into your rotation, because here's the thing. Blizzard initially put this in in this formulation with the idea that this would replace Void Form on short pulls. So first of all, replacing Void Form on short pulls, it's a 12-second dot. It's not the shortest thing in the world. If it was a 6-second dot, then yeah, I could see it replacing Void Form on shorter pulls. But it's quite a lengthy dot if you're thinking about very short-lived ads. So that is something to be aware of. Also, the fact that with our Legacy of the Void talent, Void Form costs 60 insanity to activate. So I could try Devouring Plague with 50 insanity, or I could simply wait for an extra 10 insanity, like there's an extra GCD or 2. It's not a big deal. And then I could use a Void Eruption, which itself does quite a chunk of shadow damage. Also gives bonus spell power, will give me some stacks of bonus haste, will let me cast a Void Bolt, which also hits pretty hard. And then, again, because Void Eruption doesn't actually cost insanity, it simply starts the insanity drain, then you can just cast your Devouring Plague anyway, right? You can cast it anyway. So it's a little bit weird. It's a little bit clunky in that sense. You're going to want to go into Void Form anyway, and then cast Devouring Plague when you get into Void Form. I believe what we're also going to want to do is cast it at the end of Void Form as well, so to basically drop out of Void Form with it, so that we keep as much uptime of the Devouring Plague dot as possible, because it does so much damage. And of course, you're not going to be able to cast it when you drop out of Void Form, because you need to build up to that next Void Form, which takes a little while now with the new stats that we have, right? So you're going to want to cast it towards the end of it to make sure that you get that uptime. And then you obviously cast it again when you go into Void Form. So it's a little bit clunky in execution, but honestly, I actually find it relatively fun to play with. It's a bit stressful with the 50 insanity cost and the low haste that we have now. I think they could lower the insanity cost of this to 40, maybe even to 30, and it would feel a lot better. It would be a lot easier to weave it into your Void Form, and it's actually quite fun to have a third dot to consider keeping up on your priority target. So yeah, there you go. The next big thing that we've got going for us is, of course, the Legendaries that are coming in Shadowlands. These Legendaries, you're going to be able to earn them, you're going to be able to work towards them and craft them up yourselves and choose what powers and stats you want to go on them. I'll do another video explaining that in more detail, but let's look at the ones that we have for Shadow Priest right now. We've got 3 generic ones, 3 Shadow Priest specific ones, and then there's actually 2 Discipline Priest ones, which I guess could work for Shadow. I don't think you'd use them, but I'll show them to you anyway, just in case they somehow end up being viable. First of all, the generic ones. When Shadow Word Pain expires on a target, 5 allies within 30 yards of the target are healed for 3% of their maximum health. This obviously is, it's a healing one. It's for helping out your group. You're probably not going to be wearing this. You're going to want something that does damage, right? We're damage dealers. That's how we think. But maybe later on in the expansion, if we're able to equip 2 legendaries, or maybe even 3 or more, who the hell knows what they're going to do. But this could potentially actually be quite good. Obviously, with Shadow Priest, we're keeping Shadow Word Pain up all the time, but when a target dies, it does count as expiring. So in Mythic Plus, like clearing through multiple packs, you're going to heal your allies every time a target dies. That could actually be kind of nice, so it's certainly worth bearing in mind for later in the expansion. Then we have Leap of Faith. Instead causes you to leap to your target and has 2 charges. Again, by default, it's a 1.5 minute cooldown, which will pull an ally to you, a party or raid member to you, on 40-yard range. With this, you can jump towards them. Again, this is very cool and very unique and a really welcome form of utility for a spec which has pretty bad mobility and some of the worst mobility in the whole game. So this is nice. Again, being utility-based instead of throughput-based, you're probably not going to be using this, but perhaps later in the expansion with more legendary slots opening up, this could be really good. Then finally, for the generic ones, this one is actually useful. This one lets Power Infusion also give you 100% of its effects when used on an ally. So this sort of doubles the value, roughly speaking, of Power Infusion. This one could actually be extremely good. The one concern, of course, with this is that, let's say, whenever Power Infusion would be good for my ally, doesn't necessarily mean it would be good for me. This wouldn't be as much of an issue on, let's say, a Holy Priest or a Discipline Priest. In fact, let's say, there's big raid damage coming out on the raid. A Holy Priest could slap this on another healer, and you've got 2 healers power infused. That could be awesome for healing some burst damage, for example. With Shadow Priest, it's a bit more awkward. You'd want this to be used sort of towards the end of your Void Form to kind of elongate that Void Form as much as possible and help you generating sanity. Would your allies' cooldowns sync up with that? Probably not, so it's a bit awkward. But nonetheless, it could end up being pretty good. And especially if we are always using Power Infusion on allies, then this could end up being a way to get it on yourself as well. So there you go. a couple of Discipline Priest ones here, just so you know that they're there in case somehow weirdly they're good. But Power Word Shield instantly heals the target for a tiny amount and reflects 30% of damage absorbed. Again, I don't see us using this, but it's there. We also have this one, which will reduce Shadow Word Death's cooldown by 8 seconds and causes this damage to trigger Atonement. So it's a Discipline Priest one. It does give us cooldown reduction. Again, we have our own legendary that affects Shadow Word Death, which I'm sure will be better, but it's just worth noting that this is there in case in some weird way this ends up being good. Then we have 3 Shadow ones. It is worth noting actually at this point that there will be 1 more generic legendary coming and 1 more Shadow legendary coming. So do stay tuned for those ones. I'll try to do an update whenever they come and whenever we get tuning on this stuff, right? But first of all, here's our actual Shadow Word Death one. Shadow Word Death consumes 6 seconds of Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch, instantly dealing that damage to the target and generating 10 Insanity. So this is really, really nice. Generate even more Insanity with Shadow Word Death. Suck up your dots, pretty cool. If you're using this for execute in particular, well, you don't really need your dots on something that's about to die from execute if it's a regular weak mob in a dungeon, for example. So this could be quite fun and could combo very well with a Shadow Word Death build with a new Death and Madness talent, which we'll take a look at in a little bit here. Our other option here is your Shadow Fiend or Mindbender will do 20% more damage as Shadow Flame damage, and the cooldown on Shadow Fiend and Mindbender are reduced by an additional 40%. So this is going to work really nicely going for a Mindbender build. Obviously, this works really well with the Mindbender talent. We have a Mindbender Conduit, which we'll take a look at in a second, and the Night Fae Covenant ability, which we'll take a look at in a little bit as well, also reduces the cooldown of Mindbender. So if you put all those things together, there is the potential for a very powerful Mindbender build. In fact, at the time of recording right now, it is the best build numerically for Shadow Priest, for single target damage at least, and I think even in AoE damage. So yeah, that could be a potentially very, very powerful legendary to grab. And then my personal favorite one is this one. Mindflay has a chance to spawn a Void Tendril that channels Mindflay at your target for 15 seconds, generating 3 Insanity while it deals damage. This does a fair whack of damage. It's single target, of course, because it's based off of Mindflay, so if you're in AoE and you're Mind Searing, this won't really do anything at all. But it does feel really fun in single target. This was an artifact trait in Legion. It's obviously the whatever the Mindflay Tendril is a corruption effect in patch 8.3, but it's coming back with Insanity generation baked into it in Shadowlands, which is really nice. It just looks really, really cool. So it's a welcome one to have here. I realized that I didn't show any gameplay of these, so let's actually take a look at them in effect. So let's do our Shadow Word Death one first. Okay, cool. So here we go. These are the duration of our dots on the target. Bam, I hit him with that. It does bonus damage. And you can see that Painbreaker Psalm is going to do, for example, with Shadow Word Death doing a baseline 1,500 damage. By absorbing some of our dot duration, it's going to do an extra roughly 1,000 or so damage. So that's quite a nice little chunk of it. Here's our Mindbender one. This is causing Shadow Flame damage. See, it actually doesn't show up in our log, so it's hard to see. But you can see it coming in here in details. And then finally our Mindflay Bracers. Let's see if we can get it to proc. Actually, we just get it to proc from spamming Mindflay. So let's cast a bunch of Mindflays. See if we can get some of our tendrils down. You can actually get more than one. Let's pop this off so we get some haste. Why the hell not? Power Infuse. Spam, spam, spam. Put our dots on as well. There he is. There's our Void Tendril. Look at him go. And he is Mindflaying and helping us generate extra Insanity. What a champ. The second big new system of power, of course, that we're going to have are Conduits, which come through our Soulbinds. I'm not going to look at the Soulbinds themselves in this video. The Soulbinds are, of course, cross-class. But these Conduits, these little gem slots, if I look at an empty Soulbind, you can see them here. You've got Endurance slots, you've got Potency slots, and Finesse slots. On the DPS, quote-unquote, Soulbind, you can have 3 Potency slots. And we've got a few options here as the Priest. So looking at our Endurance Conduits first, these ones will help your survivability. We have Light's Inspiration. This one will have Desperate Prayer heal you for an additional 5% of your max health over 5 seconds. The text in white is the part that we think is going to scale up. With the different item levels of the conduits. Now, Blizzard has said that they're working on a new way for you to get higher item level conduits, and they're removing the whole destructible conduit stuff. So how you're going to obtain these, And all of that, how you're going to replace them, upgrade them, that stuff we still have no idea how it's going to work. But this is just an idea for what the baseline stuff is going to do. So this is Desperate Prayer 1. Next up, Translucent Image. For the first 2 seconds of Fade, you take 5% less damage. And then Charitable Soul, casting power with shield on an ally, also shields you for 10% of that amount for 10 seconds. So these are obviously quite underwhelming. Finesse Conduits are a bit more exciting. Clear Mind, Dispel Magic, Purify, and Mass Dispel cost 20% less mana. Move with Grace. This one is probably the most exciting Finesse Conduit. Levitate gives 20% increased movement speed. Power Unto Others. Casting Power Infusion on an ally reduces its cooldown by 5 seconds. And finally, for the Finesse Conduits, another nice one here. Mental Recovery. After Psychic Scream ends, affected target's movement speed is reduced by 40% for 5 seconds. Then the big ones, let's be honest, the Potency Conduits, what you're all here for probably. We have Rabid Shadows. Shadow Fiend's attack speed is increased by 20% and it deals 10% more damage. So you've got a very nice synergy here between Mindbender, Rabid Shadows, and then where is it? The Shadow Flame buff to your Shadow Fiend and Mindbender as well. And again, you combo that with a Night Fae. I'll show you some gameplay of that. And your Shadow Fiend, your Mindbender, is going to potentially do an awful lot of damage. So this really opens up a Mindbender build in a big way. Words are hard. Shimmering Apparitions is a bit of a weird one. When your Shadow Word Pain does non-critical damage, you have a 5% chance to create a shadowy apparition. Normally these proc on our crits, so this now procs on our non-crits. Kind of odd in the sense that the more crit you get, the worse this gets, I suppose. We'll see how this works out. At the moment, shadowy apparitions do basically nothing. They've been nerfed and nerfed and nerfed so much over BFA because of scaling issues that with our sort of base start of expansion class, they do basically nothing. So this is, unfortunately, at the moment, I would say almost entirely useless. One that's a bit interesting is Dissonant Echoes here. Void Bolt has a 5% chance to reset the cooldown on Void Bolt. Now, unfortunately, this appears to proc, which hopefully they will fix. This appears to proc when your Void Bolt does damage rather than when you cast Void Bolt. This is a problem because obviously Void Bolt has a very short cooldown time. And if you're very far away, like if you're at max range from your target, it's got quite a bit of a travel time as well. So this could be quite clunky to use in your rotation. If they made this proc on cast, it'd be a lot easier. You'd be able to notice it and then press it again off GCD once that GCD expires. That'd be much better. So hopefully they change that from a usability perspective. Then the most exciting one, I think, for the Potency Conduits for Shadow Priest. Mind Blast does an additional 5% damage. Okay, cool. And has a 5% chance to make your next Devouring Plague cost no insanity. Devouring Plague costs a lot of insanity, so this is going to feel really good. It's going to be great as well to get like a second Devouring Plague out on a second target in multi-target situations. That's going to be kind of nice. And yeah, it's just a fun little proc, so I'm quite happy to have that one in there. Okay, so before we talk about the Covenants, which is obviously new and very flashy and exciting, let's talk about something which isn't very new or flashy or exciting, apart from two new talents I want to look at. But our talent tree, it's a disaster. It's a really bad talent tree. We've got lots of dead talents, lots of mandatory, like, you know, Shadow Word Void in PvE content is basically mandatory for, you know, the third expansion running essentially. Body and Soul, basically mandatory. Otherwise you have literally zero movement at all. Lots of dead filler talents. We've got two, Death and Madness, a new talent, and we've got Surrender to Madness, which has been changed again. Death and Madness is actually pretty good, so here's a positive thing. Hooray. If a target dies within 6 seconds after being struck by your Shadow Word Death, you gain 40 Insanity over 4 seconds, and the cooldown of your Shadow Word Death is reset. This has an interesting combo with, where is it? No, not that one. Yeah, this one. Shadow Word Death consumes 6 seconds of Shadow Word Pain and Vampiric Touch, and it will also generate 10 Insanity. So, I mean, Shadow Word Death by default is doing 15 Insanity. Plus 10 from this, that's 25. Plus 40 from Shadow and Madness, that's 65 Insanity every time you hit something with Shadow Word Death close enough to it dying. So that's pretty huge right now in the current builds. That's actually very cool. And yeah, you can imagine in a dungeon, kind of, you know, a pack gets low and you start like Death and Madness, Shadow Word Death sniping them down. That could be quite a fun gameplay style. I mean, the big downside here is that Shadow Word Death, seeing as it does all the damage back to you, if you start spamming that spell way more often, like, you are going to die. Your healer is really going to hate you, and you're probably going to hate yourself. I don't know, like, that's a big problem with it, so maybe they could, again, look into the Shadow Word Death self-damage a little bit, because that's a little bit sketchy for that particular build, but I think it could be a fun playstyle. I mean, the big question is, well, Shadow Crash does AoE damage and generates sanity, 20-second cooldown. Very easy to use, very straightforward. That might just be better. We'll see. I hope this is good, because that seems quite fun. The other one that has changed is Surrender to Madness. This one, well, it's a 2-minute cooldown. Instantly gain 100 sanity and cast Void Eruption. So I believe this does restart your Void form. Okay, and then for the next 25 seconds, your insanity generating abilities generate double insanity, and you can cast while moving. If the target does not die within 25 seconds of using Surrender to Madness, you die. You die. So, Surrender to Madness has been a problem talent ever since it was introduced. The issue is that it tends to be too extreme. It's either almost entirely useless and overshadowed by, like, just Legacy of the Void. It should be baseline, by the way. Another one. Baseline, probably baseline. I don't know. Lots of other ones could probably be baseline. Legacy of the Void baseline. I did a whole video talking about problems with the Shadow Priest talent tree, so I won't go into it too much. But yeah, Surrender to Madness. It's either been terrible or way too overpowered, like an Emerald Nightmare, for example. This one has a couple of quirks to it. So number one, this puts a debuff on the target, right? If that target dies in like 5 seconds, so I cast Surrender to Madness on them, they die 5 seconds later, Surrender to Madness is gone. Right? It only lasts while the target's alive. So you really want this on a target that's going to last about 20 seconds. So you get the value out of it, but you're not going to genuinely risk dying, which makes it very clunky and weird to use. The one interesting thing it does have going for it, I will say, is that while it was just a Void Form extension thing, not that interesting. Welcome to beta. The application has just crashed. Oh no, a critical error. Let's not click that so we can keep reading the talent. Perfect. Hooray. But yeah, because Devouring Plague consumes insanity, this could actually be kind of cool. Like, I'm thinking about, like, let's say Mythic N'Zoth, and you got the 2 Thought Harvesters spawn in. So you got these 2 ads that are quite beefy, and they live about 20 seconds. Perfect. Pop Surrender to Madness. And then with that extra insanity generation, I'm just throwing out Devouring Plagues on N'Zoth, on both the Thought Harvesters, so I'm really helping to kill those quickly. I'm doing tons of damage to N'Zoth, and then 20 seconds later, the Thought Harvester dies, and great stuff. Cool. That could get good value. So in a niche circumstance like that, yeah, you know what? Yeah, maybe it could be quite good. So I think this talent has some redemptive factor with Devouring Plague. At the same time, I feel like it's going to be a balancing nightmare. I feel like it's a bit of a meme talent. I'm going to be mean and say just put it in the PvP talents and give us like the Memory of Lucid Dreams major from BFA. Just 2-minute cooldown, double insanity generation for 15 seconds, no downside. So it's a smaller benefit than this, but without the downside, and just like, okay, cool. You get like a bit of a burst CD with more Devouring Plagues and bigger Void Forms every 2 minutes. That seems good, and a good combo to the straightforward, just always up, very consistent Legacy of the Void, or the sort of 1 minute more bursty AoE of Dark Ascension. I think just give us Memory of Lucid Dreams. Surrender to Madness, it's been fun. It's eye-catching, but it's too much of a meme. That's my thoughts. Okay, let's look at the Covenant abilities when we recover from this crash. Okay, let's check out the Kyrian abilities. These are the ones you're going to get hanging out in this Order Hall, this Covenant Hall, if you join the Kyrians. Your signature ability, which is there for every single class, is Summon Steward. This guy comes over, gives you the Phial of Serenity, which you can consume for 15% health, and remove all disease, poisons, curses, and bleeds affecting you. You can also do some fun things, like tell one of my friends how great they are. Actually, these guys are Horde, so we can't tell them they're great. Boo, Horde. Horde sucks. Unlucky. So yeah, he's kind of cool. This is obviously situationally very, very powerful. If you got enemies that apply strong bleeds, poisons, curses, etc., this is going to be pretty good. Our spec-specific, or class-specific ability, our class-specific ability for Priest with the Kyrians is the Boon of the Ascended. It's a 1.4 second cast. So I think it's 1.5 second by default, affected by haste. 3-minute cooldown. Draw upon the power of the Ascended for 10 seconds, granting you access to Ascended Nova, replacing Mind Flay with Ascended Blast, and increasing movement speed by 50%. And then, upon expiration, releases an Ascended Eruption, which will explode for 1,145 arcane damage to all enemies and 1,500 healing to all allies within 15 yards, and it will increase that amount by 3% for each stack of Boon of the Ascended. So if we go into it here, let's see how much it's going to do in terms of damage. We're going to go into Boon of the Ascended, going to cast Ascended Blast, and this is sort of your rotation to maximize it, is Ascended Blast on cooldown, with 2 Ascended Novas in between. and there it's going to explode, and there we go. So right there we can see in the single target, yeah, we only hit one target. That's good. Ascended Blast did a solid chunk of damage. Ascended Eruption as well, and Ascended Nova. It's not terrible in single target. In single target, you're not probably going to cast the Ascended Nova at all. You're just going to cast Blast on cooldown and continue on as usual. I think Ascended Blast generates 12 Insanity. So it's worth casting in your rotation, weaving it in between your Void Bolts and your Shadow Word Voids, and your Shadow Word Deaths. It's worth throwing in there too. And you just get the free damage out of the Eruption as well. This will scale very well, of course, in AoE. The Nova is going to be much more useful in AoE, and the Ascended Eruption is going to do a lot more damage in AoE. And there is, of course, the healing benefit as well, that all this stuff is going to do healing too. So that is nice. On top of it. For priests in the Necrolord Covenant, you're going to get access to the Fleshcraft signature ability. This is for anyone of any class who joins the Covenant. This is a channeled ability for 4 seconds with a 2-minute cooldown. That will give you a shield that absorbs 20% of your maximum health. Actually worth noting here, the immune to crowd control effects that I have there is from a Soulbind. That's not baseline with the ability. However, if you channel near a corpse, then the shield will become more powerful, up to 50% maximum health as a shield if you consume it near powerful enemy, or you activate the ability near powerful enemies. This could be, I think this, again, all of the signature abilities, very situationally useful. But this one's very cool. It's a lot of extra survivability and could potentially have some interesting uses with comboing with Desperate Prayer. Desperate Prayer, of course, increasing our max health. So yeah, who knows, that could be good. Then our class ability here for the Necrolords is Unholy Nova, a 1-minute cooldown instant cast ability. An explosion of dark energy heals allies within 15 yards for 1,500 and infects enemies with Unholy Transfusion. Unholy Transfusion is a 15-second dot that does 1,500 shadow damage, and it will also heal allies that damage the target for 122. So for example, if I fire it off over here on this guy, you can see there goes the dot's ticking away. If I start hitting him, we'll sort of see some healing come through on me. I have abilities set up differently on this character, different keybinds. Yeah, there goes the dot. Very cool. Very cool. Hit him with Shadow Word Death. Bam. And we can see here that's, yeah, this is obviously going to be very powerful in AoE. This does not, at the moment, have any target cap on it, so the more stuff that you hit with this, the better. And, yeah, it also is going to do quite a substantial amount of healing as well. If you are a Night Fae Priest, you're going to get access to the signature ability Soul Shape. 1.5-minute cooldown. But instant cast turns you into a Vulpin. And you're going to get, on a 4-second cooldown, the Flicker ability, which will teleport you 10 yards forward. Now, this lasts indefinitely when you're in a rest area, so you can look really good while you're using the auction house. That, you can see the stealth effect is from a Soulbind. Don't worry about that for now. But yeah, it will give you this ability for 12 seconds, 30% more movement speed. You'll be able to blink, I think, 3 times in that duration. So yeah, pretty nifty little movement ability. Again, situational. And then the big thing for the Night Fae, our Covenant ability, is Fae Blessings, which is quite intriguing. It's a 1.5-minute cooldown instant cast. Surround yourself with healthful sprites, causing your next 10 spell casts to aid your target depending on your chosen spell. Powered Shield will invigorate your target with 2% mana or 20% resource. This does affect us. It gives us 20 insanity, which is really good, on top of Powered Shield already giving sanity. Shadow Mend will reduce an ally's damage taken by 10% for 15 seconds. Again, this could be quite useful, like on a fight, for example, like Zakul, which we saw in BFA, where there was a ton of burst damage, and actually surviving the fight on Mythic was quite difficult. Although it's quite small, this could actually have some situational utility, so that's kind of nice. For the most part, of course, you won't really be using this in most play, but it is there, and it's worth noting that it's there. The main thing you're going to spend this on, probably as the Shadow Priest, is Void Bolt, which will reduce the cooldowns of up to 5 allies' major abilities by 3 seconds. This affects Mindbender. On this character, I have the Mindbender cooldown reduction and extra damage with this. I have the Mindbender Conduit in here as well. There it is, Rabbit Shadows. So we can put all this stuff together and cast lots of Mindbenders. Let's see it in action. So we're going to come in here. We'll Shadow Crash and Shadow Word Death. Here we go. We're ready to go. Go into Void form. Throw out our Mindbender and pop our Fae Blessing. So here we go. You can see we have Actually 12 stacks because I have a Conduit empowering it. But here we go, we have 10 stacks, and you can see this Mindbender cooldown ticking away down here. And this was, of course, it's not just going to benefit you. Here's the second Mindbender. We've got, I think, 2 of them out now. It's not just affecting you, it's affecting your allies as well. You can see just how much insanity this is generating. It's really enabling us to stay in Void form an awful lot longer. And there we go. If I use Power Word Shield, you can see just how big of a chunk of insanity that gives us. That was probably a mistake there. I cast Void Bolt without having Mindbender on cooldown. So that was slightly suboptimal. You got 2 stacks of this left. Here we go, the final chunk and the final extra chunk of Mindbender cooldown reduction. Very cool indeed. Throw out this. There's our Mindbender. And yeah, you get the idea. That is Fey Blessings. You see, it doesn't go on cooldown, the ability itself doesn't start its cooldown until you have until you've actually consumed the charges. So do bear that in mind. Do bear that in mind. The Conduit that I was using there that did affect it slightly. Sorry, I forgot I had that on with Blessing of Plenty. This has got a tooltip error in it right now, right? So it makes Fey Blessings affect 2 additional spells, not 15 as it says. So you're going to affect 12 spells instead of 10. And it makes Power Word Shield, Shadowman, and Void Bolt have a 15% chance to reduce Fey Blessings cooldown by 15 seconds, which is really, really good. But yeah, this is super powerful at the moment. It's going to make your Mindbender do a lot of damage. Oh, we actually lost the details thing, but I've got another gameplay footage that will show you. And it's also boosting up your team as well. And it just has a lot of interesting utility effects baked into it. So there you go. If you like vampires and you're part of the Venthyr Covenant, you're going to get access to the Door of Shadow signature ability. It's a 1-minute cooldown when through the shadows appearing at the targeted location. 35-yard range and 1.5-second cast. So this is obviously, again, much like all the other Covenant signature abilities, situationally very useful. And you're going to get access to the Mind Games class ability. This is for all priests that are in the Venthyr Covenant. It's a 45-second cooldown, 40-yard range, 1.4-second cast time, which will assault an enemy's mind, doing 1,381 shadow damage and briefly reversing their perception of reality. That makes it so that for 5 seconds, the next 4,000 damage they deal will heal their target instead. So very nice for keeping your tank alive, or I suppose yourself in single target content or in PvP. And the next 4,000 healing they deal will damage their target. So this potentially could do quite a ton of damage if you find a mob in Mythic Plus that's going to heal, for example. But yeah, and then a key part for Shadow Priest in particular is that the reverse damage and healing will generate up to 40 insanity. This is obviously a little bit clunky to use, but if we throw it out here, Mind Games, bam, that's what it looks like. You can't really test it on a target dummy, of course, because it's not going to cast any healing spells or anything to see that damage or see the insanity generation. But yeah, I feel like this one, it's, you know, this could possibly be quite decent. I mean, in theory, it's supposed to be your best sort of like single target Covenant. That's its sort of specialty here. 40 insanity is quite a lot. That's going to feel pretty good, especially with throwing out more Devouring Plagues. But it might be a little bit tricky to use. Not too bad. I think in a dungeon or, you know, in most content, you're going to be able to get the benefit of the insanity pretty easily. But it's mostly just going to be healing your tank rather than actually doing damage. Right, that's going to be more the benefit of it there, so just bear that in mind. Okay, guys, so that is it. They are all the pieces of the Shadow Priest puzzle, tongue twister, on the Shadowlands beta. What do I think of the Shadow Priest? There was a lot of doom and gloom for the Shadow Priest coming from the alpha. A lot of people saying it is, you know, it's the worst spec and it's absolutely terrible. And me, as a Shadow Priest fan, is probably my favorite DPS spec in the game. I was very worried. I will say, and obviously all this doom and gloom is still going on. Like, you go on the Shadow Priest Discord, the Shadow Priest forums, they're in uproar. They don't like it. Now, for me, personally, I actually found it wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. And I actually found quite a few things in here that I liked and enjoyed playing with. I'll be honest with you, I did. Let me talk about some of the problems, because there are obviously problems with the spec. I think there's definitely a continued problem with the spec with secondary stat scaling. That we scale so well with secondary stats that the spec does feel quite slow and weak without those secondary stats, and it feels really fun and awesome with them. And like, it's just cool. Like on live right now, you go into a dungeon and just this wave of ghosts just come out, like your shadowy apparitions, whereas you can see like right here, they basically don't exist. And wait till you see the damage breakdown a bit further in this clip here in the background. Shadowy Apparitions, I think it doesn't even show up in my damage breakdown and details because it does so little damage. It does almost nothing. It's terrible. So there's a lot of scaling issues that are a problem there. The core of the issues, I think, come from Void Form and how a lot of Void Form's power has been baked into the stacks of Void Form. So that was Mass Hysteria in Legion. In Legion, we got 1% haste per stack of Void Form. In BFA and Shadowlands, we get half a percentage. And then in Legion, we did 2% more damage with our dots with each stack of Void Form as well. So like 30 seconds of Void Form in Legion was 30% haste and 60% dot damage. It was kind of nutty. In Shadowlands, it's a lot weaker. You just get half a percentage of haste, and that's it. You don't have Course of Insanity or anything. So there is a problem there that Void Form doesn't feel impactful enough. I think the solution would be to just add some flat baseline benefits to being in Void Form more so. Like just give it like a flat 10% haste. So you just feel better being in Void Form. You got a good reason to be in Void Form. It feels good. But it's not going to scale out of control with more secondary stats over the course of the expansion and require loads of balance, tweaks, and tuning. I think focus more on the flat benefits. I think that the scaling sanity drain and the half percentage haste per stack is enough that it feels cool and gives you that sort of hectic gameplay as you're trying to keep your thing going. I think that's good. So I think that's good enough. I think add some more flat benefits to balance it out. Devouring Plague, I enjoyed more than I thought I would. I actually did genuinely enjoy it more than I thought it would. I feel like the insanity cost is a bit too high though. Like, for example, they obviously want you to cast Devouring Plague as an alternative to Void Form sometimes, but considering that with Legacy of the Void, you get Void Form at 60 insanity, and Devouring Plague costs 50, you might as well wait the extra GCD or two, go into Void Form, and then cast Devouring Plague, so that's a bit clunky, for sure. So I'd like to see them do something about that. I think if it costs 30 insanity, you've got a good reason to cast it at, like, you know, just without going into Void Form on shorter packs in Mythic Plus. Though generally speaking, I think still going into Void Form would be good. If it costs 30 insanity as well, it'd be easy to keep it going in Void Form as like just a dot to maintain. That would work a lot more fluidly, so that would be good. So I would like to see that myself. Make it cost less so it's easier to work in. I feel like right now it is very punitive. Very punitive. Because what you want to do, you want to go into Void Form and you want to do a Devouring Plague. And certainly with the current levels of haste, it can be very stressful to actually not just drop out of Void Form immediately. Like those first few seconds of Void Form, instead of being like, awesome, I'm in Void Form, let's go, becomes like a big source of stress. Because you got to struggle to stay in after you've cast Devouring Plague. And then even bigger source of stress is you kind of want to sneak one in at the very end of Void Form. Like the last possible second, sneak one in. And that's very difficult to do. I already think the Shadow Priest spec is punitive enough without having to be like, okay, cast Devouring Plague at like whatever the last few stacks of Void Form that you can, so you get one off and it's ticking away while you build up to your next Void Form, but you don't want to cut off your Void Form any earlier than you can. So I would like to see that fixed. Again, I think 30 insanity cost makes it much easier to weave it into your Void Form without easily cancelling out. Like, it's just, you know, you could, whatever, do a Void Bolt, Shadow Word Death, and that will give you enough insanity to cast a Devouring Plague, almost regardless of the sanity drain. Like, that would be a bit better. So I'd like to see that. But yeah, I mean, on the whole, I think there's some good potential here. I actually like the Covenant abilities for Priest as well. Another very unpopular opinion, but I do like him. I like with the Kyrian that it's a big 3-minute cooldown, which is, you know, decent in single target, as you can see right there. It's not bad at all. That should be what I mean, it's got a bit of a buff. I think the Eruption hit in AoE, so there's an extra 5k there, but let's say it's about 5% damage boost, which is what it should be. So that's good. But it also has a big AoE component. So that's going to be nice because it's only every 3 minutes. So they can play around it. In single target, it doesn't affect your Void Form. It's fine. You'll use it instead of Void Form and focus on the just spamming the AoE ability from Ascended Nova. You'll focus on that in AoE. It's every 3 minutes. So you play around it. I think it's actually really nice. I love it. I think it's great. A lot of people hate it. They say, it cancels my Void Form. I really like it. Like, screw it. It was every 1 minute, I hate it. But it's every 3 minutes, all good. Unholy Nova is a bit boring. That's the Necrolord one. Just AoE damage. It's fine. Bit dull. Mind Games could be kind of cool from a single target perspective. Again, it's not too exciting. And then I do actually quite like Fey Blessings, though, from the utility perspective of, like, kind of boosting your team. It's a bit overtuned right now, it seems. But I think there's good potential there for it to be kind of interesting. So, yeah, on the whole, I kind of like it. And I like what they've done with Priest, that you've got Venthyr, short CD, single target. You've got Necrolord, which is short CD AoE. You've got Kyrian, which is long CD AoE and also decent in single target. And then you've got the Night Fae, which is sort of medium CD, a bit more utility focused and buffing your team. I think that's a good selection of stuff. So to me, it honestly looks kind of all right. Yeah, that's a Shadow Priest. We'll see what they do with more tuning and what our other legendaries are going to be. So I will definitely come back to this. Like I said, it's my favorite spec. I'll come back to you with more thoughts, and I'm curious to know what you think. I will try to keep the subsequent spec looks shorter because this one went way too long. I talked too much. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.